Life Audio.
Christian Parent Crazy World with Catherine Segars is brought to you by Life Audio and is part of our Faith Toolkit series. For more inspirational faith-affirming podcasts, visit lifeaudio.com.
Welcome to Christian Parent Crazy World, the podcast that tackles tough topics to help you be a godly parent in an ungodly world. I am your host, Catherine Segars, and in today's episode, we will tackle this really tough question. How do we talk to our kids about pronouns? Using preferred pronouns is ubiquitous among Gen Zers and beyond. I actually just went to my daughter's orientation at a very woke university, and every single student leader, like over a dozen of them, introduced themselves by stating their name, their major, and their preferred pronouns. Now, I'm going to do a whole episode really soon on that experience and share my open letter to my child's woke university, so be looking for that. But how do we start the conversation about pronouns with our kids, especially our young children? Ryan and Bethany Bomberger, co-founders of the Radiance Foundation, have created some incredible resources to help us have those conversations. And they have their finger on the pulse of what is happening in our public schools and universities and all the ramifications of this ideology. That is what we're talking about on this episode of Christian Parent Crazy World. So let's get started. Ryan and Bethany Bomberger are so inspiring. You are going to love these guys. They are the founders of the Radiance Foundation, whose mission is to create a culture that believes that every human life has value and purpose. Through the Radiance Foundation, Ryan and Bethany educate about culture-shaping issues and motivate people to put truth and love into action. So today we are going to talk about some of their resources for children. Their groundbreaking book, She is She, has been endorsed by pro-life advocates such as Dr. Alveda King, Eric Metaxas, Kristen Wagoner, Kristen Hawkins, and Abby Johnson, just to name a few. I love these books. I think that you guys are going to love them too. But our conversation does not end there. Ryan, Bethany, and I talk about the danger this ideology presents as our children get older, with organizations like Planned Parenthood now handing out prescriptions for hormone blockers and cross-sex hormones. The damage done by these dangerous drugs can be irreversible. This is serious, moms and dads. We have got to be in the know. So with that said, let's jump right in. Ryan and Bethany, welcome to the program. Thank you for being on Christian Parent Crazy World.
Hey,
we're so glad to be here.
It's great to be here.
Yes. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's so great to see you guys again. I met you a couple of months ago. I know you meet a ton of people. We met at National Religious Broadcasters Conference. Ryan, you were on a panel, an incredible panel with Nancy Piercy. She's going to be coming on next month. I'm very excited to talk to her as well. But I was blown away by your ministry, by your testimony, and by the books that you've created for parents to talk about really tough topics. So, but first off, we actually hung around the same neck of the woods a long time ago, and we found out it's been a few minutes. But we were at the same graduate school, which is crazy. Yeah. We kind of know some of the same people. I think we had talked about some of the people we knew back then at the same time. But you guys are Regent grads, right?
Yes.
Yes, we are. Yeah. Proud to be Regent grads.
That's where we met. Fell in love at first sight. So yes. Regent is great for many reasons.
I agree. You know, I met my husband when I was there too. He wasn't in school there. He was working at the hotel that was right there. And so I met him. It turned out to be a really great place for me, both educationally and relationally with my husband. So I met him. And so we have 5 kids. You guys have 4 kids.
Yes.
Tell us just a little bit about your family before we jump into today's topic.
Well, we have 4 awesome kiddos. We have 4 teenagers. We have a 19-year-old, a 16-year-old, 15, and a 13-year-old. Our oldest is at college. She's actually at Liberty. And then we homeschool our 3 younger ones. And when I say we, I actually mean she. She does the majority of the homeschooling. I'm like special events coordinator or something like that. But
that sounds familiar. That's about how we operate. That's our MO as well.
He's the backup principal.
Yeah.
If I need disciplinarian, go to Dad's office. That's when you know that things are getting pretty fierce.
Sometimes we have to wire him in remotely when I'm in school having a bit of a crisis or that sounds very familiar. So that is so cool. I absolutely love the resources that you guys have created for parents. There's such difficult conversations that our parents never had to have when we were growing up with us, right? They didn't have to have conversations about pronouns and she is she and he is he and these types of very difficult concepts, which actually are quite simple. But
ironically.
I know, it's crazy. So we see what's happening in our culture in terms of the war over gender these days, and parents are I think, really waking up to it. You guys are in Loudoun County, which is one of those crazy counties where so much news has been coming up out of. I'd like to get into that maybe at some point as well. Sure. But I think parents are starting to wake up to this dangerous ideology. But what made you guys in particular want to take on this topic?
Well, it's interesting. We run the Radiance Foundation. And so our heart is to illuminate, educate, motivate. So we illuminate that every life has intrinsic value. And we educate about these crazy culture shifting issues. You know, we like to hit all the easy ones. We talk about abortion and adoption, fatherlessness, poverty, race. And our prayer is that we would motivate people to not just have a faith, not just have knowledge, but actually be able to articulate what they believe, articulate a reasoned worldview, which is a biblical worldview, and not be silent when it comes to these really difficult issues, but have a voice and a voice of truth, which is a voice of healing, which is a voice of redemption, and to not just feel that they've been drowned out by the lies that the culture is just spewing. And for years, I was a teacher. For a couple of decades, I taught private school. I taught public school. My degree was in education. And so when we jumped into this whole culture war, really wanting to shift the culture and speak life, it became very evident very quickly that there is a great fear of talking about hard things. And when we as parents and adults find something difficult to speak about, then we end up being quiet and not talking to our kiddos about it. So our heart is to really have resources that replace the fear with a confidence that comes when you have some powerful tools that will bridge the gap between a personal worldview and tackling these hard issues. And again, all these years, both teaching and then homeschooling and just being a mama for, 18 plus years, I realized how powerful literature is, especially, and how really this can be a cornerstone and a jumping off point to talk about these really difficult issues, either go deeper into them or to be able to just have simple truths laid out for you. So that's what led into writing books like Pro-Life Kids and our initiative to talk about what it means to be pro-life. And then into She is She and He is He, which Ryan and I co-wrote together those books. One day we were standing in the kitchen and joking. I'm like, this pronoun thing is crazy. What if we wrote a whole book just highlighting the craziness of changing up your pronouns? And that's really what started She is She and He is He. And we quickly learned that there were many people that appreciate having a book that really talks about a simple truth that if we had written it 10 years ago would probably be sitting on a shelf somewhere.
I know. Well, everybody would have said, well, why do you need to write something so obvious 10 years ago? It just never, it was like, whatever. But now we're in a world where we have a Supreme Court justice who doesn't know what a woman is. So that's where we live. And I love that that's always been my heart too. I think that God just designed certain people certain ways to just run towards those controversial topics. And I've always been that way. Yeah. That's us. We're kindred spirits here for sure. I've always just gravitated towards that. I love a healthy, robust debate, respectful, compassionate, loving, but truth-filled debate. I just love this. I want to read a part of this. She is she. And the illustrations are incredible. I love this.
Yeah, shout out to Ed Kaler who did our illustrations. He just captured our heart.
Yeah, I want to just dig into this just a little bit because it's so beautifully written.
Yeah.
Your ability to run. She is she, boys and girls, kids in her family, your grandkids. You can read this to them. She is she. She is not he. She is not we. She is she. She's a mother. She's a daughter. She's a sister, not a brother. She's a granny. She's an auntie. She's a bestie, not a grampy. She is she naturally. So I have to ask you guys, why did you want to write something so hateful?
Well, because we're a little bit crazy. Honestly, if you want to deal with the world the way it is today, as a Christian, doing things the conventional way doesn't really work. You have to be willing, like you said, just jump in. And so what motivated us? Just where we live, just the insanity that's happening in our public schools, just the denial of basic biology. And of course, we all know this is more than just about the erasure of gender. It's about the erasure of objective truth. And so we've always loved taking the creative approach in order to educate people. So we live here in Loudoun County, Virginia. People may have heard of it. It's basically ground zero for school boards going wild.
Yes.
So that's also kind of the impetus for this, because we have teenagers who are being indoctrinated. And, for a while, we're like, oh, well, this shouldn't be taught to high schoolers, all this confusion. But now we know that this is even as young as pre-K. And so why not create these children's literature books, these beautifully illustrated books, to capture the hearts and minds of young children and just reinforce what they should already know. We know what a boy is. We know what a girl is. Remember Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? He sang that old song, girls are girls and boys are boys, and something about being fancy.
Who knew he was so hateful too?
Right. That's apparently hateful. And that's the thing about these books. They're beautiful, and they don't take any kind of harsh approach. In fact, they're intended for young children. I would say 2 through 8 and even older. But it's really kind of an introduction. And what's great about each book, like sheisshe.org and heishe.org, have further resources to have, for adults to have conversations with teens. Because this stuff goes deep. There are only certain things you want to introduce to really young children, but reinforcing what the Bible says, reinforcing what science says, because science is always, confirming biblical truths. And so we wanted a loving approach. But apparently, we're told, you're bold. You're really bold for doing that. This should kind of be like a standard, right? Should be.
We did. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. We had the opportunity. Part of our She Is She initiative is a partnership with American Heritage Girls, and we have a patch. So there's a patch program, and so we went and we were the guests at the local American Heritage Girls, and we're able to just spend the night talking about the book, doing activities that have to do with that. And one of the moms, she came up to me halfway through and she just was shaking her head. She's like, I can't believe it. I'm on the verge of tears. She's like, I can't believe it. It's just such simple truth. And we are so scared to say the things that we know, that we've always known are simple, biological, science proven truths. And part of the activities I do with the kiddos is, if you finish the story at the end, there's 2 sections, one that says, what does the Bible say? And what does science say? And we know that science is a reflection of really what God says.
Right.
And it's a great exploration of what the revelation of God. And so as we even moved through the night, you just begin to, it just reinforces what so many of us have been scared into believing isn't true anymore. And it's just a return to simple truths. And as much as it feels like it's a bold statement, it's ironically not. It's just a return to what we've already known and what we already know. And what happens is, as these parents are reading, as these adults are reading, they're remembering, okay, this isn't difficult. Being bold just means saying what we already know is true. And so as much as the books are created for young kiddos, they're just such a tool for adults to just reinforce and validate what's already in their heart. So many of the adults fear saying anything because, oh my goodness, you're not being tolerant. Oh my goodness, you're you're being phobic or right. And this is a hate crime, but this just reinforces something so much bigger and the bigger war against humanity, and a war that's really being fought by an enemy that will never, ever have what men and women have. And that's the opportunity to be a co-heir with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. His time is getting cut short, and he is saying, I want to bring everybody with me into this land of confusion because I don't want them to have what I won't have access to. So we know this is warfare, and I just believe that this is just another way to fight.
And it's a beautiful way to fight. And we need to start as early as possible, because they're trying to break the binary, right? In our kindergartens. Yeah. That's an initiative that we have in the kindergartens, break that binary. And I don't understand. First of all, there was another question I wanted to get to, but it just reminds me, and I meant to pull this quote, the Chesterton quote, that wars will be kindled over the idea that 2 + 2 = 4 and that the trees are green. The very basic reality that we see with our eyes, that we know to be mathematically true, that we're going to fight wars over these things. The idea of that truth being consistent from person to person, and the idea that there is two genders, there are two genders. I mean, honestly, if you don't even believe in God, we see that that's true, but we know that to be true as believers, that we were created in the image of God. Yes. So we do know that, but we don't have to argue this from a biblical standpoint. We can just argue it from a biological standpoint. But one thing I wanted to ask you guys about, because this is so fascinating to me, in terms of the LGBTQ ideology, there's such a conflict there. How did we get here? Because, really, we've got transgender ideology is trumping everything now. And it really is diametrically opposed to the ideology of lesbianism or gay or bisexuality, because a lesbian would say, I am female and I'm attracted to females. I'm a woman and I'm attracted to women. So a gay person would say, I'm a man and I'm attracted to men. A bisexual person would say, whatever I am, I'm attracted to both men and women. It recognizes the binary. Transgenderism suddenly has trumped everything and erases the binary. It erases women. It erases men. It erases over 170 years now of advancing the rights of women to be present in society, to have our own sports teams, to have own kind of, to be elevated in society, to be at all levels of society. It erases all of that. And then, of course, we have Ketanji Brown Jackson, which I was just referring to, in her Senate confirmation hearings, being asked the most basic of all questions, what is a woman? And she can't answer it. Meanwhile, she wants to advance the cause of women left and right. It's so contradictory. So how do we end up in this place where transgender ideology trumps everything?
Yeah. Well, the movement has been very stealth for years and years, and they would scoff, of course, in mainstream media and academia. Oh, when people would say, particularly Christians would say, there's an agenda. Well, of course there's an agenda. And they were just really excellent at carrying it out. Yes. And the slow movement, it was almost unnoticed to when you got the L and you got the G and then you got the B. But once the T came along, I mean, it came in, ferociously. And we're seeing the aftermath of that. Even those who, as you mentioned, who are part of the whole LGBTQ community are like, wait a minute. There's a problem with the T. And the problem with the T is it's now just, it wants to dominate. Yes. Like before it was about tolerate, but now it's all about I must dominate. In fact, I must control what speech you use, which is why we had local ordinances and laws, even the Equality Act, if it were to be passed by the Senate, that says, oh, wait a minute, you can't use certain parts of speech. I mean, since when is your speech controlled in order to accommodate a people group? Like even the Civil Rights Act of 1964 didn't say how you had to refer to me as a brown person, So it's so insane that you have this dominance now, and you see it overtaking, obviously, academia. You see it overtaking public schools, our mainstream media, where they are bowing to this. They won't even describe. They're talking about, criminal, is on the loose. They are on the loose. Oh, but it's actually only a single individual. I mean, you're talking about it's a public safety issue when you can't even describe what is. And when we lose the concision of language, which is what transgenderism is doing, man, you lose a lot. And I think it's because of the lull, the apathy. You know, some people saying, oh, well, that ship has sailed. Well, that ship has sailed. No, it's not that it's sailed. The ship is sinking. And now people are frantically trying to get water out of the ship because they realize, wait a minute, first of all, the ship is worth saving. Our culture is worth saving. But we have an enemy, and we know it's a spiritual thing. We have an enemy that is determined to not only to sink us, but to, as you mentioned earlier, to absolutely destroy us. And we're seeing the destruction on young children. And I think that's part of what has awakened some people. We still need a lot of people to wake up, particularly the church.
Yeah. So right. I think you are right, though. People are starting to wake up because when they realize that they're losing their children if they don't get on board with this, because it's crazy. Parental rights are being taken away in situations where people are divorced. And if you're not on board with what mom wants to do and the kid wants to do, then, well, see you, Dad. You're no longer a part of your child's life.
Right.
You may not even have controlled visits that are supervised. It's I know Alliance Defending Freedom, who you've worked with before on some of your own casework. Previous. Yeah, they're awesome. They're awesome.
Thank God
but
for them.
I know the work they're doing is so important, but it's mind boggling. I think people are starting to wake up, but let's talk a little bit about the ramifications of not recognizing that she is she and he is he, because what they want to tell us is that, well, we can just pause puberty. We can just hit the pause button and you can come back to it whenever you want. That is not true. That's not what these drugs were intended to accomplish. They were intended to help young children originally who were going into puberty at 5 or 6 or 7, right? And so they were pausing it until the right time. The idea behind these puberty blockers was to help children that were abnormal in a physical way. And now you add on to that the cross-sex hormones on top of that, which is this chemical cocktail that we have no knowledge of exactly where this is going. Talk about the dangers of acquiescing to this transgender ideology.
You know what I find really ironic is that we hear the whole global warming religion preached because there's so much worry what everything's going to be like for the generations to come. And here we are selling, right? Just peddling these these drugs that will literally you can never come back from some of the things that these folks are doing. And of course, we're hearing so many stories from detransitioners, right?
Right.
And so you have this whole crazy mixed up religion of global warming and how our future is going to look. And at the same time, these same people are championing really messing up the future for so many people who are willingly and hopeful as they take these drugs. They're being sold this crazy lie. So it will be affecting them physically from now until forever. We know it's a myth that you can pause this stuff. I mean, this is just absolute ridiculousness, but it's physical mutilation. We're talking mental issues, not addressing the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. All of these things together are just looking toward a future where we're going to see a huge disaster. There's no coming back from where you're going to go. I mean, these wonderful folks that are coming out of, they're transitioning and they're transitioning and their voice, they're saying, I wish I had never done this. I could never undo. But yet we know the amount of money behind selling this lie. We know that if somebody's going to go in and have some of these surgeries, that it's not just going to be a temporary one-time surgery. We're talking a lifetime of tweaks and a lifetime of pain and a lifetime of never getting to the end result, which is this peace that's being sold. They're never going to find that peace because everything is based on a lie.
Yeah, you can't change your gender.
It's really painful. And the overarching thing behind all of this is this love of money and this lawlessness The saying like, listen, you can't tell me what I want to do. There aren't going to be laws that really work with me. I love myself and I'm going to do what I want to do. And so lawlessness runs rampant. And we see in the word of God that lawlessness just leads to embracing lies and the spirit of delusion. And so we are looking at a pathway of severe destruction. And that is what the future holds as we continue to push this lie.
Well, and the other thing, it's dressed up under the guise of compassion. For instance, at the school board meetings that we're part of, in fact, I was at one last week, where they're saying if you don't allow these children to have these remedies, that they're going to commit suicide. And of course, now we know through further studies, and we've known this actually for a long time, though, but drug like Lupron, which is one of the most common puberty blockers, increases anxiety, increases depression, decreases your bone density. By the way, there are a lot of physiological effects to the point where the National Health Services in England has now stopped prescribing these to young people, because what they found and what they've known actually since the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Paul McGue, he said they stopped doing what were called gender reassignment surgeries, because more than 87% of children actually lose these gender dysphoria feelings
4 out of 5
on their own. I mean, this is the reality. And so a recent study also showed that to be true. And the painful part is that so many young people have now been sold this lie, but it's under this whole guise of compassion. If you love someone, as Bethany was saying earlier, you're going to tell them the truth. You're going to give them the options to be able to come out of whatever the origin is of that confusion. And we see this because most of it's a social contagion. We're not even talking about the definitive, who actually have gender dysphoria, like Walt Heyer, one of the former transgender individuals who's now an advocate against all of this insanity. But that's the thing that breaks my heart as a father. And that so many men, like even you talk about Title IX and all the girls being replaced in sports and stuff like that, but so many men being silent on this, while it's young girls who are mostly impacted by this confusion. Like, where are the men? Where are the fathers? Why aren't they protecting? Why aren't they speaking up? At the school board meeting, there were 3 or 4 fathers. Many women were at that event, but there were virtually no fathers there to speak on behalf of these young girls targeted by this propaganda.
And it's tragic. They're treating them as guinea pigs. Do you think I've been curious about this. Do you think that they're just hoping that, okay, if we do this for a few decades, we treat these kids as guinea pigs. Of course, they don't know that hopefully we'll get advanced enough scientifically to do it successfully? Are they just writing off whole generations of kids as guinea pigs in the hope that they can do what they can never do? I've just wondered that, because they have to know. They have to know this is impossible. I mean, they know that. I watched, I'm sure you probably saw it too. Of course, this I Am Jazz, the great, he is on the young man who transitioned to be, it's so tragic. And the parents are so on board with this. And like you said, the money coming in for a show like that on a major network, started transitioning very, very young. Then with all of those hormones, I remember when Jazz got to the point where he was trying to do the bottom surgery. And this is graphic, and I'm sorry, but we need to know what's happening here. His penis had not developed enough. It did not have enough skin on it. It was so stunted in growth that when he went to change, they didn't have enough skin to make the quote unquote faux vagina, which they're creating a hole. They talk about, I've heard people who have transitioned and detransitioned talk about how painful they're creating a hole where there isn't a hole and trying to keep that hole open. I have earrings. Okay. If you don't have an earring in that tiny little pinpoint hole up here, and the pain I've had over earrings getting infected and stuff, and it's just this little piece of flat. I can't imagine in that sensitive area for children to be doing this to their bodies. And then this young man was crying profusely because of the pain of trying to keep that open, the fact that he didn't have enough skin. And we're just pausing it. No, we're not just pausing it. You're stunting the growth and you're sterilizing. These children are being sterilized. They can't have kids. They're taking off their breasts. They can't breastfeed. And you're not telling them the truth. Tell them, dear God in heaven, just tell them the truth about what you're going to do to their bodies. They can't even take a Tylenol at school. And yet you've got Planned Parenthood coming in and you can go to Planned Parenthood now and get these drugs, right?
Right.
Without any kind of medical referral or anything like that. They just hand them out, and they don't even have to be a medical professional at Planned Parenthood. It could be the receptionist at the front desk, because that's kind of how they do business at the nation's abortion/gender mutilation.
And I think too, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, then all of a sudden you saw this mass just switch in strategy for them. And they were thinking, okay, wait, if we're going to lose all these funds, from abortion, which we've seen that's not happening because of the chemical abortions, are bringing in a ton, but
you get it through the mail now.
Right. But they were like, listen, we need to jump on the next bandwagon. And because the DNA of Planned Parenthood has never been to care about human beings, of course they're going to jump on this. And they've created a system that alienates parents. They've created a system, and they have the support of legislation, and they have support of organization. They have so much support with their entire system that why not move to yet the next thing, the next hot topic, make money off of it. And who cares who we're mutilating in the process? Who cares?
Can I add one thing?
Of course.
About the fact that, recently they just issued their latest annual report. And so the major medical services to women have been plummeting at Planned Parenthood for a long time, particularly prenatal care. It barely exists. You can count probably in one hand how many Planned Parenthood centers, which it's hard to know how many centers now actually exist, but it's over 500. But virtually maybe 5 of them, because 0.1% of their services are prenatal services.
0.1%.
But now
prenatals.
Right.
It's crazy.
45 of their centers are now doling out the carcinogenic puberty blockers. 45, and it's continuing to increase. So you obviously see where they're going. Honestly, it's a $2 billion business that mutilates human lives in and out of the womb.
Right.
And until people wake up, people need to understand, $700 million taxpayer dollars went to Planned Parenthood last year. $700 million. So that they can continue their propaganda with abortion, continue their propaganda with all this gender confusion. And what happened to all of those activists who used to decry genital mutilation overseas?
Yes.
I guess that no one's talking about that anymore because they actually celebrate it here now in the United States.
I know.
It's insane.
Well, that's because they're fake feminists.
Right.
They were never true. They were never truly, it was never about really what it should mean to be a feminist. Right.
I know. They're not in the line of Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott. These women who really fought for women to have a voice and to be able to vote and to not be beaten in their homes and to have property rights and to actually be educated and to be able to speak. That's not what they're about anymore. You're absolutely right. This has been so helpful. I wanted, just very quickly, you had mentioned one of the long-term studies. There's not been a lot of long-term studies on this, but the one out of the cohort study out of Sweden, and I will link this in the show notes. I just wanted to read the conclusion of that. This was one of the few long-term studies on it. I think there was like 324 individuals that were in this study. It said the conclusion, persons with transsexualism after sex reassignment have considerably higher risks for mortality, suicidal behavior, and psychiatric morbidity than the general population. Our findings suggest that sex reassignment, although alleviating gender dysphoria, may not suffice as a treatment for transsexualism and should inspire improved psychiatric and somatic care after sex reassignment for this patient group. That is the science right there. That is seeing in the deconstruction movement from that, where they're coming out of this. And it's tragic because we have used them as guinea pigs for reasons that had nothing to do with helping them to be their authentic self. And I love what you have in the book. My favorite line in the book, and both of these two books, when she is she is free. When he is he is free. We will never be free when we're trying to live a false identity, a false reality. I'm reminded of, I'm sure you've heard Laura Smaltz Perry maybe you haven't, she was a young woman who actually went through the whole surgery because she thought her parents loved her brother more. And she, of course, got involved in the social contagion. She went through with the surgery. She had it and lived as a man for some time. Yeah. And her mother was doing a Bible study and I'll post her testimony. It's so powerful. Her mother was doing a Bible study and just asked her, would you do a website for us? And so she started doing the website, and in doing that, she read the content of the Bible study, and she was introduced to Christ. Sneaky there, through the back door. And of course, all the women in the Bible study were praying for her already for Laura.
That's so good.
And she talked about how she got saved. She came to know Jesus, and her first prayer was, God, help me to be a godly man, which of course is a prayer that God could not answer for her because he did not create her to be a godly man. But he didn't force, and the women didn't force. They just allowed her to go on this journey. And then she said she remembered so clearly one day she was in this pit. She could see herself. She was in a pit, and she just saw Jesus reaching his hand out into the pit. And just lovingly saying, trust me, trust me. And she took his hand and she walked out into the light, and suddenly she knew, I can't be a godly man because I wasn't created to be a godly man. I can't be free as a godly man. Like you said in the book, when she is free. And so she walked into the freedom of who God had created her to be. And that's what we need to be telling these children, whether they're involved, as most of them are, in the social contagion of what's happening, or whether they genuinely do have gender dysphoria and confusion about that, whatever they're dealing with, that when she is free, because that's who you were created to be. And when he is free. Thank you for helping us to have this conversation with our kids.
We're so glad that you are the voice that you are.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
This is so important.
It's so, so important. Thank you so much. I want you to tell everybody where they can learn more about she is, and he is he, and the Radiance Foundation. Why don't you go ahead and give them that information?
Sure. I guess the easiest way to get to all that is to go to radiance.life. That's radiance.life. And to get the individual books, you can go to sheisshe.org or heishe.org.
That's awesome. And Ryan, I'm so excited. You have graciously agreed to stick around for the next episode. Yes. Your testimony, I just want to tease this a little bit. Your testimony, we're going to talk about life and about being pro-life, what that means. And you are in the 1% that everyone argues is why we need to keep reproductive freedom or abortion free and legal, because you were conceived in rape. And you're going to share your testimony with our listeners. Give them a little bit of a teaser right now, just a little bit.
Well, I was conceived in rape, but I was adopted in love. And it's amazing to me how, as human beings, we're constantly categorizing people. We're adding value. We're taking value away from them when we don't even have the right to do that. None of us controlled how we came into this world, yet some of us pretend that we can be the arbiters of somebody's worth because of situations that he or she had nothing to do with. And I just thank God for an incredible birth mom who chose to be courageous. She could have chosen abortion. I thank God for my parents who loved the mess out of me, and I was the first one adopted. So that's a little bit about my story. And now I'm married to my favorite person on the planet, Bethany, love of my life. And we have 4 kiddos, but it's amazing what happens when we choose love and when we choose strength, which is why it's so important for us to speak hope and life into people's situations.
Yeah. Amen. I'm so excited. You guys aren't going to want to miss next week. It's going to be incredible. So thank you so much, Ryan and Bethany, for being with us. My kids say hi and they love you.
Yay. God bless you. Till next time.
Thank you. One final note. Not long after we recorded this interview, Ryan was diagnosed with cancer. Now, he is a pretty young guy, and this came as quite a shock, but I believe his prognosis is very good. But please join me in saying a prayer for Ryan and Bethany and their 4 kids, and be sure to tune in next week for my interview with Ryan. Let me tell you, this guy, he is just brilliant. He has a fierce intellect, a huge heart, and one of the most incredible testimonies I have ever heard. What he has to say about the value of every human life is something that we all need to hear. want to thank you for joining me today. Look, I know there are a lot of things you could be listening to right now, and I really appreciate that you took this time to spend with me. I hope you will join me for my next podcast when we take aim at some aspect of our culture that threatens to derail our parenting and steal our kids' faith. If you enjoyed this episode of Christian Parent Crazy World, would you consider telling a friend and sharing it on social media and giving it a good review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and following me on Facebook and Instagram? Oh, and maybe you could say that Christian Parent Crazy World is the best podcast you've ever heard in your entire life. Just a thought. And be sure to check out my website, which is CatherineSeegers.com. That's Catherine with a C. I have lots of articles and resources there that will help you on your parenting journey. And if you subscribe, I will be sure to send you some really cool free stuff and notify you of future podcasts, articles, and blogs. I want to end this and every episode with a word of encouragement. God gave you your kids, your specific kids, for a reason. That's because you hold the key to unlocking who God created them to be. We'll see you next time.
Christian Parent Crazy World is a production of Life Audio and Salem Media. If you liked what you heard today, please take a second to rate and review this podcast in your favorite podcast app so that more listeners like you can find the show. For more faith-filled, inspirational podcasts, visit us at lifeaudio.com.